Welcome back to this week's Hot and Cold Report here at Fantasy Baseball Cafe. I'm Jason Gilbo, taking a look at the start of the second half, who's hot, who's not, and who can we count on riding the rest of the way. We're getting that crunch time of getting into the playoffs here with only really 2 months left, so a lot to look at, a lot to build your team around, make those final moves. Start things out here, we're looking at some trade moves, and hopefully one that kind of gets the ball rolling is Scott Kazmir out of Oakland, and he's heading to the Houston Astros. So they're building their rotation for the playoffs and trying to make that playoff push. Kazmir, McHugh, McCullers, and Keuchel. So there's a lot to like right there, especially going into a series, especially Keuchel, Kazmir leading it off, and the way McCullers has looked. And if McHugh can get it together, which he has so far in the second half, there's a lot to like about that. And as far as fantasy value purposes go, Kazmir's not going to lose a ton of value moving from Oakland to Houston. He'll be backed by better offense. He's been really good this season. And, of course, he's going to lose the park factor boost, but still not enough move to make him a seller. So, solid arm going forward. Look at some other arms who had a tough start to the second half. Michael Wacha and Chris Sale. Chris Sale faced the Royals, so they had a tough outing. Of course, they don't strike out a ton. Even though Chris Sale has a crazy high strikeout rate, still the Royals are enough to balance that out. And, they don't strike out a ton. And looking at some other arms who struggled here so far, Jeff Samardzija had a poor outing. He's going to face the Indians, so that's going to be one to keep an eye on. I've never been a big supporter of Samardzija. He's too up and down for me, so I like really riding him out in the hot streak and then selling him, which I've been kind of advocating all year. So that's something I would continue to watch and do. And A.J. Burnett had a tough outing, but picked up the win. A nice, lucky win there. I'm not really worried about him. His track record in Pittsburgh has been great. So I like him going forward for the rest of the year. Kind of some lower end guys who I'm a little worried about. Dan Herron, who's been pitching decent. Pretty decent in Miami, but through a start here, 6 innings, gave up a couple of runs, did not look good. Didn't pick up the loss, but still just didn't look good. He's a guy who could kind of burn out here as the second half moves on, but also a guy who could be on the move too. So we'll keep an eye out on him. Sonny Gray hasn't looked sharp here to start the second half, but he's pitching against two tough teams, the Twins and the Blue Jays. So kind of gets a pass from me there. Look at some hot arms. Of course, Kershaw, 27 strikeouts in the last 2 starts. He is on fire, looking to be the guy you want going down the stretch here. Another lefty who I really like is Dallas Keuchel. Had a big outing against Texas, and of course Texas is not good against left-handed pitching, but still Keuchel lit him up for a ton of strikeouts and got a nice win there. Zach Greinke kept things going, the ERA leader, through 8 scoreless innings against the Nationals and dueled Max Scherzer. So solid arm there. 2 Angels guys who have looked good so far second half. Of course, Garrett Richards threw a nice complete game shutout. Matt Schumacher threw 6 scoreless innings with 10 strikeouts. So he looked really good. He's a guy who could be out there on the waiver wire. Of course, he picks pitches in that big ballpark. Had a tough opening year, giving up a ton of homers, but he's getting his ground ball rate up a little bit here, enough to still below average, but better than we want it. So another lefty, John Lester, threw great. Almost threw a no-hitter against the Braves, took it in there pretty deep into the 7th inning. He's a guy who's been pretty disappointing for probably his average draft position of where he went. But I think he was kind of overpraised coming into the year. So I mentioned him as a nice buy low target, and I believe he's going to be solid coming down for the rest of the season. Him and Arrieta should pick up a lot of the slack of that Cubs pitching rotation, so it'll be interesting to see what he can do. James Shields has looked great. He had tough no decision, but picked up the win. He's thrown 2 starts since a break. the strikeouts have been there. So he's looked like Shields earlier in the season, just minus the homers. So I'm looking at a guy, Mike Leake, who's another guy who could be on the move. I would really like him if he got into a big ballpark because, he's a pitch to contact guy who can give up homers from time to time. Of course, he does strike out guys against, below average matchups, but picked up 2 wins, of course, against the Cubbies. 1.29 ERA through 14 innings so far since the break. So I really like him going forward. And he should be a solid guy, especially if moved, get him into a bigger ballpark behind a nice, much stabler offense. So keep an eye on him. He could be out there on the waiver wire on someone's back end who could be a nice trade piece if you want him. So moving to the plate, we are looking at a few really hot bats and a few really hot teams, as a matter of fact. The Angels have been red hot, and a lot has to do with Cole Calhoun hitting the ball well and hitting 450 since the break, or last 7 days here. 3 homers, 6 RBIs. Cole Calhoun's been kind of up and down this season, but looks to be red hot coming out of the break. He'll definitely mellow out here, but should be a guy who should stay around 300, produce some doubles and some homers for your fantasy teams going the rest of the way. So I really like him. Call up here, Kyle Schwarber hitting 455, 2 homers. Of course, he had that big outing with the 2 homers against the Reds. Schwarber's going to be up for some time until Montero comes back, and it's going to be interesting to see what they do. Montero hasn't been a great average guy, but obviously a nice guy behind the plate to have. Defensively, Schwarber's below average defensive catcher / outfielder, whatever you want to call him. But God, for as long as Schwarber is going to be in the bigs, he's going to be a great fantasy addition to your teams. And Michael Brantley hitting 474, 2 homers, 9 ribbies in the last 7 days. Hasn't struck out, which he's never a strikeout guy, but hasn't struck out yet in those 24 play appearances. And the All-Star game could have been, or the break here could have been good for Brantley, who was dealing with the back issue, got a nice week off, and who's taking advantage of that week off and coming out hot. I really like him to keep it up for the rest of the year, especially, we know what his track record is. We know how good he is when he's completely healthy. Whether he's going to be completely healthy the rest of the year, that I don't know. But if he is, I like taking the risk on Brantley and trying to acquire him for someone who's not a believer in him as well. If you're looking for some middle infield help, whether off the waiver wire, Scooter Gennett, who was really solid in 2014 off against right-handed pitching, and he's been great here so far, hitting 571 in the last 7 days, and no homers, 4 runs, 2 ribbies. He's hitting in the back end of the lineup, which is disappointing. But he could be someone who takes over Lucroy in the second spot, maybe move Lucroy to 6th or 7th, just because Lucroy hasn't been steady this season. And Gerardo Parra's hitting 421. Parra's been really great. He's another guy who could be on the move too, so that could be something that shoots Gannett up into the top of the lineup. So something to keep an eye on over the next week or so until the deadline moves, because I believe Parra could be on his way out. I'll look at some other bats here. Xander Bogaerts still hitting the ball well. Of course, he's not a big power guy, and it's killing the Red Sox for him hitting out of the 3 spot, but he is the only one on the team that is hitting right now. Betts, Pedroia, Hanley, all hitting below 100 over the last 7 days. And Ortiz and Sandoval have not been good as well. Brock Holt's been struggling after a pretty decent first half. So it's tough luck with those guys, especially with Betts, who's going to be a keeper or so for the next handful of years. But for those other guys, I would maybe try and move them, see what you can get for them, or just try and ride this out. And probably the hottest bat so far that we are really looking forward to, hoping he can keep it going. Robinson Cano hitting 391 with 3 homers in the last 7 days. Hot out of the gate, whether he did it with the short porch out in Yankee Stadium or down in Detroit. Come on, we know what Cano can do. I wasn't a big believer in him for the rest of the season. I still think it could be a trade high moment for someone who really believes in him, because there's still a lot of people that do. But or you just keep him. But I would definitely throw him out there and see what you can get for him. I kind of like that idea, especially with a lot of people who need help in the middle infield. Look at some other bats who have been hot. Jose Altuve and Carlos Correa are just studs up the middle. A lot to like about them. Prince Fielder, big week in cores. Of course, faced Kyle Kendrick, who is absolutely awful. The guy who's really picked up is Francisco Lindor for Cleveland, shortstop, young prospect who's going to be a solid bat and play for some time, and especially in a weaker position. So he's hitting pretty well. Hit a homer, hitting 350 here in the last 7 days. So a lot to like about him, and really the Indians bats have picked it up. Outside of Brandon Moss, Carlos Santana's looked pretty good. So definitely some interesting guys going forward. Looking at guys who's not, like I said, Betts, Pedroia, the rest of the Red Sox look pretty bad. Chris Bryant's going through a little slump here, as well as Anthony Rizzo. So two guys who are having solid first halves, kind of slipping up here to begin the second, but of course nothing to worry about there. Ryan Braun hit 133 since the break. Mike Trout hitting 238, but a couple of homers. Dealing with that heel issue, but if he's in the lineup after 1 day off, definitely a solid guy to rely on easily. A couple of guys here that could be on the move. Yoenis Cespedes, been mentioned as a trade option for the Tigers, who should be selling off here. So it'll be interesting to see where he goes. He'll definitely improve an offense pretty gratefully. And I know the Pirates are looking for an outfielder, but PNC would absolutely kill his power numbers. So it's a little disappointing. There's a couple of Colorado guys who've been slumping a little bit since the break. Nolan Arenado, nothing to worry about there. Corey Dickerson could be on his way back. So good news there. Still hitting for a low average. Jock Pederson hitting 192 in the last 28 plate appearances. If he's not hitting homers, he has absolutely zero value. I really like the idea of trading him. I'm sorry. I know the power is nice and a lot of people like him. But hitting 192, it's almost like you're Steven Souza, who people don't like because of the low average. But I know he's a young guy. Keeperly, you're probably just going to throw him on your bench and try and ride the hot streaks. But redrafts, I'm shipping him off or throwing him on my bench for the rest of the way. Let's see. Taking a look at some other bats who've been struggling here. A couple of A's bats, Billy Butler, Ben Zobrist. Zobrist is another guy who's been on the move. Brett Lowry. A's were, actually a pretty reliable offense here, I believe, especially with Burns, too, at the top of the lineup, but struggling lately. I think they're going to be a team that really fades out for fantasy value going the rest of the way. So I may look to get those guys on the move, see what you can get for them. Maybe even Vogue too, if you haven't already. I know a lot of people did that earlier while he was hitting high 300s and hitting a homer every couple of days. So Jose Bautista hitting 263 with 3 homers. The homers are going to be there. The average has been really disappointing this season. If you're in a redraft, I'm going to ride him the rest of the way. If you're in a keeper league, however, he's getting up there in age. And the homers are nice. If he gets it going here, I'm looking to sell high on him and see what you can get for another outfield replacement who's possibly younger, and see if you can get an arm attached to him. So I really like that idea of moving Bautista. That's going to wrap it up here for the Hot and Cold Report. I'll be back next week to kind of wrap up July as a whole and get ready for August and September.